Hello Year 10, welcome back to your next living room lessons and the last lesson on this coasts topic. So what you're going to need today is your exercise book, a pen and a ruler, your phone, and again you're going to need a copy of the textbook. So you're going to need your electronic copy, login, open, so you can look at some pages whilst we are working. There's a few pages you're going to need today. So before we dive in, as normal, we have got our jog your memory. So 3 quick questions. What is meant by hold the line? What type of landform is a spit and how is it formed? And who might agree, disagree with building on greenfield land? Remember that? So scan the QR code and go have a go at this quick quiz questions for me. Okay, so the last thing we're going to have a think about in this coast topic, obviously we've looked at different landforms, different processes, how geology affects the coastline. Then the last 2 lessons we've been having a look at managing the coastlines and how we can protect and not protect certain parts of coastlines. And then the last thing we're going to do today is actually tying this in with the topic we did before on climate change and having a think about coastal communities are going to be some of the most at-risk parts of the world due to sea level rise, and thinking about what could be done to protect them. So we are going to be thinking a bit UK based, but we're also broadening it a little bit again, and we're going to have a look a bit more internationally at how sea level rise will affect coastal communities. So this is your title today, Changing Sea Levels and Coastal Protection. Please can you all write that in and underline it for me, and we will get started. So in terms of who is at risk, obviously there's loads of coastlines around the UK. And all around the world. And obviously some places are going to be considerably more at risk than others. But by 2030 it is estimated, so only 10 years away, that 950 million people in the world will live in the low elevation coastal zone, the LECZ. And these are areas that are less than 10 metres above sea level, so places that are really, really low down. Climate change presents a threat to these people because the sea levels will rise. So within 10 years' time, there are going to be 950 million people all around the world who are going to be at great risk of losing their homes and where they live due to the continual rising sea level. So the first thing I want you to do very quickly, very easily, is pause your video and just make a copy of the first bullet point. Don't need you to do the whole thing, just the first bullet point, okay? So there are a few kind of key causes as to why we are likely to have more sea level rising. Obviously, we know that climate change is happening. We know that sea levels are rising. We know that water is expanding. We know that glaciers on land are melting, and this is leading to sea level rise. But kind of within the UK, there are 2 kind of other reasons as to why we will be quite vulnerable to this. So the first one is this idea of a storm surge, which we have spoken about before when we've looked at tropical storms. And a storm surge is an abnormal rise of water which is generated by a storm over and above the predicted tide. It's often made worse by bad weather when the high pressure at sea is pushed down, but low pressure means the weight of the air is lifted and the sea can rise up. So when we have these periods of low pressure over the sea, it means the sea gets lifted up by all that wind, all that low pressure moving upwards, and it leads to these large displacements of water. So what I would like you to do very, very quickly is pause your videos, watch this YouTube video for me, copy down this storm surge equals and the red bit, so just the red bit, and then I want you to make a copy of this diagram at the bottom here, which kind of shows how different storm surges will affect coastlines. Okay, so we've had to think about storm surges, but there is one other kind of key way that sea level rise is going to impact the UK, and this one is quite complicated. And the second cause of sea level rise is called post-glacial rebound. Okay, so in the UK, the southeast coastline has been sinking since the end of the last ice age. It's sinking by around 2 millimetres a year. Sea level rise from climate change will mean there's 3 millimetres a year of an increase. So the 2 together mean a combined rise of 5 millimetres a year in the southeast of the UK. Now, the reason why the UK, the south of the UK is sinking is like so. So here's my arm. My arm's like a giant seesaw, okay? And this is the UK. So if you imagine in our last ice age, the north of the UK had loads and loads and loads of ice on it, considerably more than the south of the UK. So that meant that the north of the UK was heavier, which meant that the south of the UK was lifted higher up on our seesaw. So it was higher up in the south of the UK because of all this ice in the north. But as we know, throughout this post-glacial period, the ice in the north of the UK has been slowly melting. And as it slowly melts, it now means there is no longer more weight in the north of the UK. And it means that over time, the south has begun to sink as our seesaw starts to level out. So due to this post-glacial rebound, not only do we have to worry about the fact the sea is rising anyway, but also to the fact that the south of the UK is sinking. So these two things combined have quite a significant impact on the coastal communities in the south of the UK. We would say that coastal communities in the south are more at risk from post-glacial rebound than other parts of the UK. So what I would like you to do is pause videos and make a copy of this kind of first bullet point. So post-glacial rebound equals, and then this. And what you might want to draw is a bit of a diagram that might look a bit like this, actually, not like this so much. So we've got two diagrams. Okay, so south, north, and we're going to put a little ice cube on here. Okay, so this was during glacial. However, this is now. So our ice has melted, which means that the south has come down. So the south of the UK has sunk due to this melting ice. So you might want to draw this quick diagram just to remind yourself what this post-glacial rebound means. So as I mentioned, in the south of the UK, this has been quite catastrophic. So what we're going to think about is an area of the UK which has been hugely affected and what they're doing. So we are having a look at a place called the Thames Gateway. So the Thames, obviously the River Thames we know goes into London. But this whole area on the southeast coast of the UK, between kind of Essex and Kent, is this huge low-lying estuary environment of the Thames River. And it's really, really low down. Now this area currently has the Thames flood barrier, because they believe it's not big enough to protect London from future floods caused by climate change. So the estuary is no longer big enough to protect, so they've had to build the Thames River barrier. However, this is now no longer sufficient. The Thames River flooding barrier, which protects all of this area of land from flooding, is now no longer strong enough. So they've had to put into place a new plan, and this is called the Thames Estuary Plan. And the aim is to protect London by 2100 for a 2.7 metre rise in flood levels. So what they're having to do is, out on this estuary, they're having to develop new estuary environments in order to protect this area of London. So what I would like you to do, and you are going to need page 165 in your textbook. So you're going to have to get the online textbook up and running. You should have used this last lesson, so hopefully you all know what you're doing with it now. And what I'd like you to do is pause videos, make a copy of this. So a copy of all of the information in this box. And then I want you to have a go at answering these two questions here to outline the Thames Estuary Plan. I will go through and talk through it a little bit in a minute, but pause videos now and have a go at this. Hopefully you've had a go at that. I've got the book in front of me because I can't remember all of these numbers. So the property at risk, it says list 4. So you could have had, there's over 500,000 houses, 40,000 commercial and industrial properties, 400 schools, 16 hospitals, 35 tube stations, and over 300 kilometres of roads. So this area of the UK is one of the most densely populated parts of the UK. But it's also one of the most at-risk parts of the UK from coastal flooding. So that's why the Thames Estuary Plan has needed to be put in place to help kind of support this area. So the three main strategies are to replace existing embankments, seawalls and sluices. So to renew and replace any existing sea defences that are already in place. But one of the huge things they're planning to do is generate 876 hectares of new salt marsh, so providing these whole new intertidal wetland zones which will act as a natural buffer from that sea level rise. And then the last thing they're trying to do is they're considering whether to build a new large barrier, so a new barrier from flooding further out from the existing barrier, which will cost between 6 and 7 billion pounds. So the money they are investing into this part of the UK, because of the worry of sea level rise and what it would have on this coastal community, but also on London, far outweighs the cost of building the new protection. So what I want you to have a go at next is using now you're going to page 167 of your textbook, so just turn your page, and what I want you to have a go at is copy this mind map into your book, probably on a full page, full A4 horizontal page, because you've got quite a lot to write here. And what I would like you to do is write notes on these 4 different groups of or places in the UK that are going to be affected by sea level rise. So 4 different coastal communities that are going to be affected. So the first one, there's already some sentence starters for you, but then for the other 3 places, you're going to have to come up with your own notes to describe how these places are going to be affected by sea level rise. So again, you need your textbooks out, so page 167 of the online textbook, and I want you to make some detailed notes on this. This is what you're spending the majority of today's lesson on, so please don't rush it. Okay, so I'll go through this quickly. So, people are most vulnerable where there is a higher proportion of people claiming benefits, a fast turnover of people due to economic migration, so people coming and going in an area, a high proportion of poor quality housing, and an over-reliance on tourism. So these 4 things make a place very, very vulnerable. So we've got 3 different places that are going to be quite vulnerable to this coastal flooding, and I hope you've made a few notes on them. So people in Skegness are incredibly vulnerable because there's a lot of people living, for example, in caravan parks. So there's a lot of people, retired elderly people who have a very low income, who are on low-lying coastline, living in not very permanent, low-quality housing. Great Yarmouth and Llanwelly in Wales are going to be quite significantly affected because there has been a huge reduction in the kind of industrial and economy there. So both these places used to have big ports, big tourism resorts, but due to decline, there are a lot of people in this area who are out of work and who are claiming benefits. And then the Outer Hebrides, so way up in northern Scotland, some of our small islands, they're really remote. There's a small amount of people living in these islands, but we also have a lot of young people out of work. So there are lots of places and lots of coastal communities in the UK that are going to be significantly affected by sea level rise. So what I want you to think about now, and you don't need to write anything down, we've obviously spoken about another coastal community somewhere else that is going to be very heavily affected by sea level rise. What's the place I'm thinking of? I hear you, you're all shouting at me. Yes, it is the Maldives. So obviously the Maldives is another coastal community where we know there's going to be a lot of people very heavily affected by sea level rise. But they are not the only part of the world, the only other coastal community where there's going to be huge impacts from sea level rise. There are a lot of places that are going to be very affected. So what I want you to do now is new little subheading of effects on communities worldwide, because we're moving away from the UK now, we're thinking on a more general worldwide international scale. And what I want you to do is read this information here and then answer these 5 questions in full sentences. So the question is, where are the world's most at-risk communities? You would say the world's most at-risk communities are, and finish that sentence with your answer, okay? So these quick 5 questions, all of the information's there in full sentences. So hopefully that was really straightforward for you. World's most at-risk communities are those living on river deltas, so the very end bit of a river where it's really low-lying land. And as that sea level rises, those people are going to be really vulnerable. There are lots of global cities, so 136 coastal cities are at risk of sea level rise. So that's obviously going to be a big impact on the economy of a lot of places. And some of those cities include New York, Singapore, and Mumbai, good old Mumbai. LIC cities are most at risk because of the poor quality housing and the lack of coastal protection. And environmental refugees are people who have had to move and leave their homes because of sea level rise. So environmental refugees are growing hugely around the world. So the last thing you're going to do today, again, is using the textbook, and you're going to have a look at something called Small Island Developing Nations, or SIDS, which are these really, really small countries, which, like the Maldives, are low-lying islands, and that is their whole country, are these small low-lying islands. And there are loads of these around the world. And these are the places that are going to be the most significantly affected by sea level rise. These coastal communities are going to have the biggest impacts. So what I want you to do is go back to your textbook again, and you're going to go to page 168 and 169. And I want you to have a look at the different figures in the textbook. And I want you to complete the 3 activities. So 2A, 2B and 2C, and 3A, which are at the bottom part of the textbook in the green box. So again, you're going to answer these in full sentences, and I want you to do it under a little heading of Small Island Developing Nations, okay? So have a go at that, and we will be done for today. Okay, Year 10, well done. So we've covered loads again today, but that is now the end of our coasts topic. And next lesson, you will be doing a bit of revision, and then you're going to be doing a small little kind of learning review on everything we've done so far in this topic, but your teachers will tell you more about that at the time. So what you should have in your book today is a storm surge definition and the flowchart, the post-glacial rebound definition, and maybe this diagram, the Thames Gateway notes, areas of the UK that are going to be affected by sea level rise, and then the worldwide communities that are going to be affected, and then the island nations tasks from the textbook. Well done, Year 10. Hopefully see you all very soon.